Returning now to our top stories tonight, we learned this afternoon 8 teenaged girls have been charged with second-degree murder after police say they swarmed and stabbed a 59-year-old man early Sunday morning. Meanwhile, police in York Region released the names today of the 5 victims from Sunday evening's condo shooting rampage in Vaughan, allegedly committed by a neighbor. 2 violent stories sending many people searching for answers as to how this all could have happened. To help unpack some of this, we're joined now by Ju-Young Lee. He's a U of T sociologist who specializes in the causes of violent crime. Thank you for being with us to help talk about such a difficult story.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So I want to start with the condo shooting and describe for me how the videos put up on social by the suspect track with your research around violent crime.
So one thing we know about mass shooters or rampage killers is that they often announce to the world their intentions. Sometimes it's the day of, sometimes it's the day before, sometimes it's a week before, but increasingly social media has become a way that they do this. If you remember back to the Parkland shooting, Nicholas Cruz posted a video on Facebook stating that he was going to shoot up the school. So this has become part of a new playbook, if you will, where rampage killers go online, post videos that announce their intentions, and often these videos are a means of justifying their behaviors.
You know, in this case, the video had been seen. Of course, the condo board members had been saying that they felt intimidated, that felt fear. There had also been this process of taking legal action. I mean, what else could people do in these cases?
I mean, I think one thing we have to be very clear on is that rampage killings don't just emerge out of thin air. There's always a trail of red flags, and this case is no different. So I think we have to get better at identifying those red flags. We have to get better at creating intervention possibilities for police to intervene when someone's at risk of harming themselves and others, to create opportunities for healthcare workers to intervene so that they can support somebody who might be going through an acute crisis. So I think we just have to be better at intervening and identifying those red flags.
From what you've seen in the video, is there anything potentially criminal in the videos themselves? Anything that the police could have intervened on earlier just with that aspect?
I mean, it's always really hard to say, but I think that anytime somebody goes on a rampage, there's always an escalation process. There's always a series of events that kind of provoke that person. And typically, rampage killings are done by people who feel that their actions are justified. Now, that the rationale and the reasonings that they might employ are sometimes very flawed and warped and very self-serving and narcissistic. But I just think that anytime somebody makes declarations that their back is against the wall, that they are ready to do violence and take justice into their own hands, that we have to take that seriously.
Okay, good point. All right, let's switch over to the story about the 8 teenaged girls. What does the research say about swarmings like this alleged incident?
Well, one of the things I think we have to be careful of, you know, it's a very sensational and tragic story, but one thing that we do know from lots of research is that when people get together in groups, they sometimes behave in ways that they wouldn't by themselves. There's a very powerful mob mentality that sort of takes over, and that's particularly the case when it comes to violence, and we can think of many different examples of this, like riots are one example, hooligans at football games are another example. So there are a number of instances where people get together in groups, and the group psychology that emerges in the midst of violence kind of whips and compels people to do things that they might not otherwise do on their own. So that's one of the things that we know from the work on group violence.
Now, one of the things that's making these allegations so sensational, so shocking, is how young these girls are. 3 of them just 13 years old. I mean, does the research support or explain how stunning that detail is?
Well, this is a little bit of an atypical case because young men are much more likely to commit homicide than young women. And that tracks, you know, perennially. That's not something that is like a one-off. It's kind of a constant. So um, I suspect, and this is just a hypothesis, but it could have been that they got together and they wanted to do something for clout, maybe to post online on a content platform where we see lots of young kids posting fight videos, and then something in the midst of the violence and the action itself escalated to the point of no return, and people lose themselves in these moments. So I'm very curious to see how this unfolds, but that is definitely a possibility.
All right, well, such difficult stories for people to absorb right now, especially so close to the holidays. But thank you so much for wrapping some research and some knowledge around as we try to unpack them.
Thank you for having me.
Ju Young Lee is a U of T sociologist who specializes in the causes of violent crime.